Welcome back to the Redraft Show. Show title pending. We'll get all of that stuff figured out. We're back on the channel. It's me. I'm Chev. It's a great day on this side of the dirt. And I'm here with one of the best and sharpest minds in the business, an avid Bears fan. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm here with Dave Kluge of Football Guys, prolific writer, fantasy tweeter extraordinaire. I actually found his work a few years ago when I was searching George Pickens, and you didn't think I was going to tell that story.
You did, yeah.
And so I've been a big fan ever since. I've always used Football Guy stuff. Like, we play in IDP home league, so I've used Football Guy stuff for snap counts and a bunch of other stuff. So I had to go in and find your rankings. And so I was, we'll talk about that. But welcome to the show, Dave. How we doing today, brother?
Doing great, man. Having a good time. This is always a fun time of year. Like, at this point, you kind of have done like all of the hard work. There's so much prep that goes in, through the rookie season. And then you get that kind of lull in the summer where you're really grinding numbers and whatnot. And now this is the time where I think you need to be a little bit reactive, and it's really tough. I feel like the only way you can kind of do it is have an experience going through multiple years, but trying to decipher like what's real coming out of training camp and what's smoke that we have to ignore. And it's this constant battle, like every news story that comes in, like, am I going to react to this one, or am I just going to kind of brush this one off? So it's a really fun time of year because now we actually have news, and like some of it might be meaningless, but there's videos on Twitter of guys in pads hitting each other, and that's the first time we've seen this in about 6 months. So I'm fired up.
Yeah, it's great to have real football to talk about again. Like I always say, things start to get a little weird and a little hazy the further you get removed from actual American tackle football being played. And so you've been just killing it with the training camp, with the training camp reports. So I wanted to bring you on. We talked about this for a while. Bring you on and talk Bears because this is one of the most hot ticket items in fantasy. Like, you can choose your own adventure, and if you're right, it's going to be pretty profitable. If you choose poorly, well, I mean, you've seen Raiders of the Lost Ark, and if you haven't, you should. So, I don't know where you want to start, but there's a lot that we can talk about with the Bears.
I think the starting point is just Ben Johnson, of course. That was the first big change that they made in the offseason. I mean, playoffs weren't even over yet. You heard the way like Detroit fans were just like gnashing their teeth. They were furious that Ben Johnson signed before their run came to an end. And a lot of them blamed that playoff loss on the fact that Ben Johnson had already kind of turned the page to Chicago. But either way, this is a creative offensive mind, and that's something that the Bears have fallen victim for in the past. I mean, Matt Nagy came in, and he was a big creative mind that helped shape Patrick Mahomes. So this isn't without risk, but this time it does feel a little bit different. I'm still a big Lovie Smith fan, and for whatever reason, Bears fans aren't about him. This football that I got right here behind me is signed by Lovie Smith. I mean, like I was a huge fan of just the culture that he instilled and the way that he ran the team. And then they brought in Matt Nagy and Matt Eberflus, who didn't really know what their identity was. Like, They kind of wanted to be a player's coach, but they also tried to want to be like a hard coach at the same time. And it just inevitably ended up losing the locker room for both of those coaches. Now we've got Ben Johnson, who everybody talks about, is just like this guy who pays so much attention to detail. He preaches about this like high accountability system that everybody needs to take accountability for what they're doing. And it has immediately been seen on the practice fields. The first day of training camp, he called a play in. Caleb Williams went up to the line. He apparently read the play back wrong to the team. Ben Johnson pulled the entire first team offense on day one and was screaming at Caleb Williams on the sideline. And I think that scares off some people because they're like, wait. Like, we need to treat these guys with white gloves and take care of him. But Caleb Williams himself said that he wants to be coached hard. And he said that the biggest steps that he made were when he had coaches that would ride him really hard. So there's kind of this culture shock right now that's happening among Bears fans and the Bears media, where we heard just yesterday, they had this practice where everyone was padded up. They were thumping each other. It was the most physical practice that a lot of beat writers had said they'd seen in the last 2 decades. So I think a lot of people aren't sure how to react to what's happening in Bears training camp right now. But I love the culture shift because at the end of the day, this was just a soft team over the last couple of years, and they need to start playing more physical.
Yeah, that's a great point too. The attention to detail, the accountability, that's the one thing that you can't escape if you want to be a good football team. And it starts at the top. We saw a dynasty in Seattle literally get toppled because they wouldn't hold Russell Wilson to the same standard they held everybody else to. So hearing that Caleb Williams is being held to, an impeccable standard, like something that, again, if you lose that, in your organization, in your building, it's almost never going to work. I mean, we saw it again. Jason Kelce won't tell us what happened, but that clearly happened the year after they went to the Super Bowl in Philadelphia. So hearing that warms my heart. I guess the moving from Ben Johnson, who's one of the most brilliant offensive minds in the game and has kind of architected the resurrection of the Detroit Lions offense over the course of the last couple of years. Where does that leave you with Caleb Williams? I mean, obviously there's mixed reports from a fantasy perspective. I think he was fine last year considering he had to survive Shane Waldron. Where does that leave you with Caleb Williams? I think that, there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding him. And I think there's a lot more. I think there's a very loud negative contingent, but I don't think that there's enough people giving him his due for just how difficult that situation was to kind of navigate as a rookie in the face of a franchise.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny, and this is something Jeff Bell, my co-host on the Dynasty Show, pointed out. If you look at like the raw numbers, like if you don't look at the touchdowns, Caleb Williams and Bo Nix had almost identical seasons. The difference is Bo Nix had some more touchdowns, which we know are a little bit flukier and harder to predict. Everybody is like over their skis on Bo Nix right now and not giving Caleb Williams his flowers. It's also a thing of expectations. A guy drafted first overall and a guy who was clowned as one of the worst picks in round one. There's a lot of layers that go into how the perception of Caleb Williams is right now. But there was another, not to go right back to Ben Johnson, but there was a quote from him that really stood out to me where they said, what are you trying to build off of from last year? And he said, nothing. We are hoping that Caleb Williams can forget everything from last year. They are basically treating him like a rookie. And they said there was nothing good that came from last year. And the tendencies that he ended up developing late in the season, playing some hero ball, that's not what they want him to do. They want him playing more in structure. So what they're doing right now, it sounds like they're treating him like a rookie, like building him from the ground up. We've heard a lot of people throwing around the phrase drinking out of a fire hose, where they are just putting Caleb in situations that make him uncomfortable. This is a guy who, dating back to high school, has never played under center, and that's where Jared Goff played and was able to really kind of change his pace after being a shotgun quarterback in LA. And it sounds like they're trying to do the same with Caleb right now. So I think expectations are obviously high, given that he's the number one overall pick and the weapons that are there and Ben Johnson being there. But I wouldn't be surprised if this team does get off to a bumpy start. First of all, their schedule is brutal. I mean, not just the divisional games that they have to play in the toughest division in football, but then they've got some really tough road games as well. So I think that there's this like fear that if they don't finish better than they did last year, that this year is a failure. But this could be one of those situations where they have to take a step back to take multiple steps forward. Something else that kind of bleeds into my analysis with the Bears is every single year, going into every single season, somebody is on the hot seat, whether it's the head coach, the offensive coordinator, the quarterback, the GM. And this feels like the first time where they have a base that they are going to stick together for multiple years. Ryan Poles just got his extension. Ben Johnson got a 5-year deal and then 4 years left on Caleb's rookie deal. So these three guys, for better or worse, are tied together through at least the 2028 season. And you talk about the resurrection that the Detroit Lions franchise had. That didn't happen overnight. I mean, there was a 3-13-1 team, and then they were just under 500 the next year, and then they win 10 games the next year, and then they win 13 games the next year. And they talk a lot about that slow progression, how it takes years for quarterbacks and head coaches to get on the same page. So I think that we could see improvements from last year, but any expectations that Caleb is just going to like immediately become a superstar quarterback, I'm pumping the gas there a little bit. I think we might still be another 2-3 years away from seeing the full true ceiling.
Yeah, that's an important point too. And I've said this till I was blue in the face. Like, we can't judge. Again, we've shifted now. The NFL teams have shifted their expectation from, building out a quarterback and building out an organization to, hey, we got to try to win this on this guy's rookie deal. And if it doesn't go well, their rookie year from a team success standpoint, then, everybody's hair's on fire. Everybody's scrambling around. We just did this with Bryce Young, where he was the worst number one overall pick since Jamarcus Russell or whatever. I think Jamarcus Russell went first, right? Anyway.
No, it was you're talking about Bryce Young. That was the Bryce Young, and then CJ Stroud went right after.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm saying
Jamarcus Russell was a number one overall pick who busted, but even he got a handful of years. Like they didn't just pull him out year one. Like there used to be a longer leash. Fans in this day want immediate production, or they just get frustrated quickly.
Yeah. And you turn the page too fast. So just exercising a little bit of patience with Caleb Williams and this offense. But
are you a survivor? Are you not going to give up? Then you need to sign up for this new game called Fantasy Football Survivor. Instead of picking an NFL team to win each week, you set a new fantasy lineup. But you can only use a player once per season. Advance each week by staying out the bottom percentile and performing over expected. Drink. The contest is free to join. Sign up for the main event. Create your own leagues. What are you waiting for? Click the link in the description.
Moving on to the running back room. Now, I was personally thinking that you guys were going to add Travion Henderson. That was everybody kind of had it earmarked as Ashton Genty at 10 or, Travion Henderson at 30, 39 or 41. And on both fronts, the Raiders take Ashton Genty at 6. The Patriots take Travion Henderson at 38. So now we're left with DeAndre Swift and what this workload looks like. So you've got DeAndre Swift a little bit higher in your rankings than most people. You've got him at RB18. So do you think that this is his backfield, full stop, no equivocations in 2025?
I do, yeah. And you talk about them getting sniped. I mean, there were reports, the Patriots actually, their beat came out with it, that the Bears were trying to trade up for Travion Henderson. And they were just like, no, we want this guy instead. And then even if you look at day 3, at the top of round 4, right before their picks, Bashal Tutin and Cam Scadaboo went off the board. And the Bears got so pissed off that they just traded back from that pick. Like they just kept getting sniped at every single pick that they had. So I think that they wanted to add a guy. And I don't think the intention was a 7th round Kyle Manung guy, but that's the best that they were able to get. So my immediate takeaway, I'm not the biggest fan of DeAndre Swift's game. I got to be completely honest here. I mean, he plays soft. He shies away from contact. He doesn't finish runs. He tries to bounce plays outside too much. And you can go back to Hard Knocks a few years ago. I remember Deuce Staley screaming at DeAndre Swift in the film room.
Yes.
Yeah, for not finishing runs. And here we are 3-4 years later. He still plays the same exact way. That being said, there's a lot of context that goes into that season, where Jamal Williams had 15 touchdowns and everyone said Jamal Williams, took DeAndre Swift's lunch that year. DeAndre Swift sprained his ankle in week 3. And if you look through the first 2 weeks of the season, he was number 2 in fantasy points behind only Nick Chubb that year. And he was getting over 20 opportunities per game.
Yes.
They obviously traded him the year after, but I can't blame them after they getting Jahmyr Gibbs. I would have done the same, get rid of DeAndre Swift for Jahmyr Gibbs. So I can't really blame them for making that move, but it did seem like DeAndre Swift was going to be that guy in the backfield until he got hurt. And I just look at the competition here. There's been staunch silence on Roschon Johnson. Like we are hearing nothing at all about Roschon Johnson. We're getting a little bit of buzz about Kyle Manungai, but when I look at the talent levels here, look at the draft capital, look at the athleticism, all these things, I just see DeAndre Swift as tiers ahead of Roschon and Manungai. So I think that Manungai could mix in for maybe some goal line work or some short down work here and there, but I think DeAndre Swift's going to end up getting between 200, 225 touches out of the backfield.
Yeah, that's what I can't get past this. And I've tried, several different methods to say, okay, well, what if they're one of the most pass heavy teams in the league? Well, that still resulted last year. Caleb Williams, I think, was like 2nd in dropbacks. And then DeAndre Swift still ends up with 295 opportunities. And you can tell me till you're blue in the face that Roschon Johnson's going to be a thing at the goal line or whatever the case may be. We have not heard Ben Johnson say one word. I think Coach Speak Index famously pointed this out about a week ago, that Ben Johnson has not said one word in a singular press conference about Roschon Johnson. So it just leaves us with DeAndre Swift handling another massive workload or him splitting work with Kyle Manungai, which is entirely possible. We're a year removed from Bucky Irving, but everybody throws that out there. Bucky Irving was a 3rd round pick. Kyle Manungai is a 7th round pick. Now, can they move on from DeAndre Swift after this year for very cheap? I think it's like $3 million in dead cap. Absolutely. But for 2025, for redraft, which is what this show is about, I don't feel like there's a better bet for volume that's cheaper than DeAndre Swift.
And that's exactly it. And if you look over his career, like people have this idea that DeAndre Swift, again, and I think this is like real life football and fantasy football. Real life football, I have a ton of concerns. Like I'm sure you saw it last year. Like his first goal line touch of the year was a negative 13-yard rush. I mean, like he has some things that just like blow my mind that this guy still gets touches. But at the end of the day, he's been in the league for a while now, and he's been a top 24 per game running back every single year in half PPR. So yeah, he does a lot of things that just make you want to pull your hair out on game day, but he also rips off big plays, and he's a pretty good target magnet out of the backfield. He does a lot of the things that we like for fantasy football. So this is one of those things where I do have to remove like my football guy helmet, where like, I don't think he's a very good football player, and look at the numbers that year after year we write this guy off, and he just keeps churning out RB2 seasons or better.
Yeah, and that's the thing is it was so bad last year, from an environment perspective as a whole that it can only go up. Now, part of the reason for optimism for me is the fact that they've made some massive moves on the offensive line front. So adding Jonah Jackson, I was looking at Brandon Thorne's offensive line rankings. He's the 14th ranked right guard. Drew Dahlman was the 9th ranked center going into 2025. And Joe Tooney's the 1st ranked left guard. So bringing all those guys in the building along with the offensive system, we talked before the show started about how kind of the deployment, goes with the depth chart. Ben Johnson was Ben Johnson as a play caller, Detroit Lions ran 12 personnel at the 3rd highest rate in the entire NFL last year. And then the depth chart comes out with Colston, Loveland, and Cole Kmet listed as co-starters. So there's just a lot of synergy that points to DeAndre Swift being a tremendous value here. So tell us a little bit. What do you think about the offensive line additions? And obviously we both think that it's going to help with what's going on in Chicago.
I hope it will. And we got a guy on staff, Matt Batanti. He does all of our offensive line analysis. And, when we got together in Vegas this year for wild card weekend, I was talking to him a bit about his process, and he was kind of showing me his spreadsheets and all that. And one of the things that he weighs most heavily when grading these offensive lines is cohesion. And we see this often, that when you go out and you buy a team in free agency, or what the Bears did, traded for these players before free agency even opened, it does take some time there. And I think the Carolina Panthers are a perfect example, where they went out and they made all this splashy money rebuilding their interior line 2 years ago. And it didn't really help all that much in year one. But then in year two, we saw the units started to trust each other. They knew each other's tendencies, and they looked like a much better offensive line. So that's another one where I'm excited about the signings for sure. They've got a lot of big names there. They've got proven veterans there, but I don't think that they're just going to immediately step on the field week one and be one of the most dominant offensive lines in football, especially when it comes to pass protection. You got to know where these other guys are going to be. You got to trust them to pick up guys that are coming in. So I think this is another one of those where people might be a little over their skis right now, just saying, hey, we did it. We finally have an offensive line. The other big question mark is left tackle, where, they've got the interior offensive line figured out. They've got Darnell Wright over at right tackle, but right now it is a 3-way battle for that left tackle position. And if you got 3 left tackles, you don't really have any left tackle. And Braxton Jones has been serviceable over the years, but I don't think they want to lean on him. Ozzie Trapillo is the guy that they spent a 2nd round pick on, who has really, really been impressing. And then they've got the guy last year that they drafted in round 3. Always butcher his last name, Kieran Amagaji, I believe is how you say it. But he was a very developmental guy who's stepping up as well. So they've got pieces on the offensive line, but I don't think we're really going to see it take form until they figure out who that left tackle is going to be. And then when all of these new pieces on the interior can start to learn how to play with each other.
Yeah, that's a tough ask, because it's the highest paid position amongst the offensive line, with center probably being the 2nd most important.
Right.
So having a little bit of uncertainty there could get us off to a little bit slower of a start. And it doesn't get any easier, because week one, you got Brian Flores coming in with just the exotica, Mr. Marodica's exotica of blitz packages and sim pressures and just all this. You got Van Ginkel coming off one side and Dallas Turner coming. This could be diabolical. So I hope for Caleb Williams and the offensive line's sake that this is something that, that does not bear, it figures itself out during this preseason era of football. But we've spent enough time talking about kind of the lower end, or the least sexy part of the offense with DeAndre Swift. Let's get to the pass catchers. Obviously, you spent the 10th pick on Colston Loveland. You spent the 9th pick on Odunze last year. You paid DJ Moore the $100 million contract. And then just ho-hum, 2nd round, Luther Burden, the guy who forced the most missed tackles forced on 60 receptions last year in college. So one of the most dynamic run after catch threats. So tell us a little bit about what your lean is as far as these guys go as pass catchers.
Yeah, I mean, we could spend some time here if you're cool with it, because I think there's a lot to talk about with the wide receivers here. DJ Moore last year, it was concerning, the lack of effort, where you'd see him walking off the field mid-play. You'd see him giving up on his routes when he wasn't the primary read. He was just phoning in those plays. That is concerning when you give a guy $100 million and then he seemingly checks out mid-season. But I almost kind of understand it, like given the state of the offense. Like I kind of get it. And I think that, with this high accountability approach that Ben Johnson has, he's not going to get away with that. Like he walks off middle of a play, he's sitting on his butt for the rest of the game. Like that's not going to happen. So I'm excited about DJ Moore. We're getting the word that he's getting touches out of the backfield and whatnot. I think he still is the wide receiver 1 here. But the guy that I'm most excited about, I was tempering expectations for early, Colston Loveland. One, you look at him on draft day and he's just a skinny guy. I was like, this dude really needs to beef up if he wants to be ready to play in the NFL. But what I didn't realize, what I didn't think about, I should say, is that he was recovering from shoulder surgery. And when you're recovering from shoulder surgery, you can't be in the gym. And when you have muscle, it comes back really quickly after you're able to start getting back in the gym. So everything that I've heard from all the beat writers and reporters in training camp, they said when Colston Loveland showed up, he looked like a different guy. They said he had put on 15, 20 pounds since the draft, that he had filled out. And Ben Johnson has been raving about his abilities as a blocker. Now, I know you don't get points for blocking, but I think that's the most important thing a tight end needs to be able to do. Because if not, you just become Kyle Pitts, where you're too clunky to beat a cornerback and you're not getting those mismatches against linebackers. So what they're going to do is similar to what they did with Sam Laporta in year 1. They're going to have 2 play calls. They're going to go up to the line, and based on how Colston Loveland is getting played, then they can audible and switch to it. You put a linebacker on Colston Loveland, and he's going to gash you up the seam for 40 yards. If you put a defensive back on him, he's going to block you all the way to the bench. I mean, he has that kind of hybrid ability where he can do both, and it sounds like they are just going to run this offense through him. There was a count from Adam Hogue that I had to go back and rewind it because I was like, did I hear that right? And he said that when Colston Loveland stepped on the field for his first day of practice and started catching balls, he said he hasn't seen a Bears pass catcher make an impact like that since they traded for Brandon Marshall. I mean, that's the comps that we're getting to Colston Loveland right now. Right.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So I was a little bit concerned at first because I'm like, coming off the injury, he's a smaller guy, he's young, this might be like a multi-year developmental piece, but apparently he is just taking training camp by storm. And then you see it, he's listed ahead of Colston Loveland or ahead of Cole Kmet immediately on the depth chart. So we saw Sam Laporta in his rookie season be the number 1 tight end in fantasy football. I don't think I'm overselling it when I say that's the ceiling for Colston Loveland this year.
And that's the appeal, especially. So from a dynasty perspective, which is how we first connected, like that's the appeal is you get a Ben Johnson tight end with top 10 draft capital, and you have some uncertainty about the pecking order, and he's clearly one of the most talented tight ends. He was the first tight end off the board in this year's draft, so it's really exciting to hear that he's bearing fruit immediately on that selection, and he is as advertised. I had the same concerns as far as, like when I saw it, I was like, oh, he is slender. He is. Yeah. That's different. Okay. But I mean, he was also, so you have that. And
21 years old too. He's a young dude.
Yeah. He doesn't have his grown man strength. And we know tight ends age like fine wine. I mean, you got Travis Kelce still putting up numbers, although it's not what it used to be, but you've got George Kittle, who just got the richest tight end contract in history, if I'm not mistaken. You've got these guys, you got smaller guys. They don't have to be the Frank Wychecks of back in the day. There's 6'5", 270 that just line up as an inline wide tight end, and they're going to have to double, in the run game quite a bit. So getting him out in space does it. I mean, not seems like it is the best way to use a guy who's dynamic like that in Colston Loveland. As I was looking up, because I was going to attach a bunch of tweets to the show sheet about, just so I can go back and be like, okay, like referencing this. But he ran an angle route on somebody. It was like a Texas route or an angle route on somebody the other day. And it was I think it was Jaquan Brisker in the clip I saw. And it was like, oh, that's like a wide receiver. That is legitimately wide receiver stuff.
He's shifty for like a 6'6", 260 pounds. And he moves like a slot receiver. It's wild.
Yeah. So obviously you have Colston Loveland at the tight end as your tight end 10. I think in our ADP, he's tight end 12, going off the board in the 10th round. Like, is there an easier click in the 10th round for you, or just in that range?
Yeah, I mean, we just did a show, and it's funny. You talk about like the redraft show like to be named better. Alfredo Brown and I, we came up with the fantasy football show 2 years ago and have never changed the name. So I just did an episode a couple days ago with Alfredo Brown and the Football Guys fantasy football show. And we were talking about our favorite late round targets. And I talked about Colston, Loveland there. And really, I mean, not to get like too off of the Bears and into like game theory stuff, I think that whole pocket of tight ends is what I'm looking at. Colston, Loveland, Tucker Kraft, Tyler Warren. There's just so much upside there. Like I can't pay up for the TJ Hawkinsons and those guys, knowing that I can get this upside so much later. I had him as my tight end 18 a couple of weeks ago and moved him up to tight end 10. And if we keep getting more of a drumbeat like this, I might even move him up higher. Jeff Bell, my co-host, he's got him as tight end 6 in redraft this year because he sees the same upside. And if you look at it, I mean, tight ends drafted in the top 15 over the last 25 years, it's a pretty short list. Jeremy Shockey, Kellen Winslow, Vernon Davis, Eric Ebron, TJ Hawkinson, Kyle Pitts, Brock Bowers. And then, of course, Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren this year. And I think you're going to see some of those names and be like, ew, Eric Ebron. Ebron had a 13 touchdown season with Andrew Luck. Like every single one of those guys has given us a top 6 fantasy season. So like at worst, you're getting Eric Ebron or Kyle Pitts. And like at best, you're getting a Jeremy Shockey or a TJ Hawkinson. Just such a safe investment and such a high floor. My excitement for Colston Loveland is probably more than anybody else on this team right now.
Hey, real quick, if you're not in the free Discord channel, what are you doing? Come mock it up, because the F ain't for fuck it up.
That's outstanding. That's great to hear, because one of the things that you look for is you look for teams that you can create a role for the tight end to be the number 1 or number 2 pass catching option. And all the breakout breadcrumbs are there for Colston Loveland. But that's honestly, I didn't expect you to say that. I saw that he was tight end 10, but hearing that you're that bullish, and again, this is not Kunje, this is a guy who has his ear to the street. This is his favorite team. So every word that's been spoken or written on the internet, Mr. Kluge has parsed through, and this is not just conjecture. This is consistent drumbeat. So let's move on to the wide receivers, because obviously we think Colston Loveland is going to have a huge role, but there's so many question marks. We already talked about DJ Moore and kind of his come to Jesus moment, or whatever you want to call it, like his fork in the road about what we're going to do with $100 million receiver in a brand new offense. So where do you kind of land on the pecking order as far as the wide receivers go between not Loveland, but Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, and Luther Burden?
So I know I was just like gushing about Colston Loveland, and I want to give like a disclaimer. Like I'm not just a guy who views my team through rose-colored glasses and thinks everything's going to be great. And the one guy that I'm not quite as excited about is Rome Odunze. It just seems like his role in this offense, you hear that sacrificial X all the time. And I think that we're going to see a lot of that from Rome Odunze, using his size and his contested catch abilities, not to get him the ball, but to be that deep threat that kind of opens up the underneath stuff. We've heard Ben Johnson constantly. He talks about the importance of a slot receiver in his offense. And you can go back to Brian Hartline and Danny Amendola and Jarvis Landry, all the way up to what we've just seen most recently with Amon-Ra St. Brown. He always runs his offense through the slot role. And I think that's where Luther Burden comes into place, because I heard early in the offseason before the draft, Ben Johnson was talking about how important a slot receiver is. And he says, I've watched the film, and it's something that DJ Moore can do, and it's something that Rome Odunze can do, but I'd like to see a little bit more from them. And we're not really going to know until we get cleats out on the field in a couple of months here. And then fast forward 2 weeks, they go out and they draft Luther Burden. And I think had they not drafted Luther Burden, Travion Henderson is another guy who can line up and do a lot of the things out of the slot. And I think Luther Burden's a pretty well-rounded player, but you talk about the forced tackles or the missed forced tackles, and that's something Amon-Ra St. Brown did. He's not the fastest guy. He's not a guy who wins on athleticism. He wins on grit and tenacity, and he's just like hand fighting his way across the middle of the field. And that's how Luther Burden plays. But Luther Burden does have the elite athleticism. So again, I think there's a dangerous floor with Luther Burden here. It is very possible that he is just kind of the odd man out and has to wait his turn. But I think the upside is that he can be like a supercharged Amon-Ra St. Brown, where he is just playing out of the slot, can make even more big plays than Amon-Ra was able to. But because I'm kind of projecting it that way, where I think Luther Burden ends up becoming the slot receiver, Rome Odunze is the guy that I'm much, much lower on. I think that they're going to use him on the boundary occasionally. I think that they're going to use him to stretch the field, but I don't think there's going to be enough target volume to warrant his current cost.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one for me, because I really like Rome Odunze. But again, we talked about the 12 personnel. We talked about how their deployment of receivers just lends itself to, hey, this guy's going to be on the field quite a bit. I think he is the best fit for the X role, the outside X wide receiver, and he can win in those fashions. But we haven't seen Ben Johnson run his offense through an outside, building the passing tree around an X wide receiver. We just haven't seen it, and so that does give me a little cause for pause. I think Rome is a tremendous talent. And I was looking at Player Profiler before as I was prepping for this. And so he lined up in the slot more than DJ Moore did last year. But I mean, that was kind of Keenan Allen's baby, right? Mm-hmm. More or less. So that vacated area we think is going to probably go to Luther Burden. If you know about Luther Burden, you know that this last year is what caused all of the hubbub, because going into this, he and Teteroa McMillan were 1-2 as the wide receiver 1 in this class going into 2024. Obviously, Mr. McMillan, the big pineapple, as I'll call him. I just can't call him T-Mac because of Tracy McGrady. I grew up, so I can't call him T-Mac. So I'm going to call him the big pineapple. They were 1-2 in the class. And then obviously he continues his tremendous production, and Luther Burden just has basically all 43% of his targets at or behind the line of scrimmage. And now we have questions about whether or not he could win as a slot receiver. It's exhausting. So, but that's neither here nor there. So we've talked a little bit about Luther Burden. We've talked a little bit about Rome Odunze. You hit the nail on the head with the effort questions with DJ Moore, but you've got him at wide receiver 26. So is that kind of floor, ceiling? Like where do you see that going with DJ Moore?
So we kind of talked at the top of the show about like training camp news, how much weight you want to put into it. And I think if there's one, positional group on any team that I'm willing to change my stance on more than anything else, it's the Bears wide receivers. I'm looking at this as a very mercurial situation. And right now, the reason I have DJ Moore ahead is because he is the proven veteran. He's done it a lot in this offense. And we haven't heard a lot about DJ Moore, but we also haven't heard a lot about Jamar Chase. These guys are just the wide receiver ones on their team, and you just kind of know it. So I'm kind of operating under the no news is good news. Like if we were hearing concerns about effort or stuff like that, then I'd be freaking out a little bit. But we've just kind of heard that DJ Moore has been DJ Moore at camp. And I think that the culture change here can help get him back on track. That being said, I'm willing to change my stances on this. And if we start getting word that hey, DJ Moore is the primary slot receiver, he might move inside my top 15. And if we start hearing hey, DJ Moore effort is struggling a little bit, he's going to drop outside my 36 and Luther Burden is moving way up. If we start hearing that, hey, Rome Odunze is actually doing pretty well and he's going to be more involved. So I'm really keeping a close eye on this one because this is kind of how I built it up and imagined it in my head right now. But we're only 2 weeks into training camp and a lot can still change. So even when it comes down to the preseason game, when the ones are out there, we pay so much attention to snap count. I'm going to be looking more at alignment than anything else. I want to see where Luther Burden's lining up, where DJ Moore is lining up. We know we've got multiple years to look back at of how Ben Johnson's offenses operate. And it just so easily comes down to me just wanting to hyper target whoever that slot receiver is in my drafts.
Yeah. And that's a great point. Again, real football informs fantasy football instead of just picking a list. It's hey, let's pay attention to what roles people are being put in. And let's use that instead of, oh, well, this guy's ranked ahead of this guy because I like him better. So I absolutely love that approach. There was the clip of DJ Moore lining up in the backfield and taking a handoff. Do you think that that's more of, because I've always thought he could succeed. He's capable of winning everywhere because I think he's just a hell of a football player, to be honest with you. I've had a high opinion of DJ Moore, the football player, and I don't think it ever aligned with fantasy outside of the 1 year in 2023, kind of, sort of. But I think that he's a versatile football player. I think he could succeed in a Debo role where you're handing him the ball. But do you think that there will be more of that this season?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think especially we talked about kind of the deficiencies of DeAndre Swift. I think DJ Moore is more physical. I think DJ Moore could succeed better between the tackles than DeAndre Swift can. And I think DeAndre Swift has the breakaway speed that we like. I think we will see a little bit of that. And it just comes down to, man, Ben Johnson is a psychopath when you look at what he has his players do. Like, I have seen him line Amon-Ra St. Brown up as a fullback to clear out the A-gap. You'll see him in motion, like getting out here as the lead blocker. He is willing to just do anything with his players to keep these defenses on their toes. So I don't think that we're going to see like a 2021 second half of the year Debo type of role where he's getting, a dozen carries out of the backfield every single game. But I think that we will see things where, they'll send him in motion and then you'll have DeAndre Swift and DJ Moore both in the backfield. You don't know who the ball is going to. I think there's going to be some creative usage there, but I wouldn't bank on more than like 2 to 3 carries per game for DJ Moore.
Yeah, no, nothing like where he's actually the running back.
Like Debo was the running back. Like they had to go out and sign Christian McCaffrey, and because they're like, we can't keep doing this to our superstar receiver.
Right. Like it was like, hey, well, this might be a little too much. And I think that ended up, it was only like 60 carries, like 60, I want to say 60 for like 365 and maybe 8 touchdowns. That was part of the heavy lifting.
Second half.
Yes. So that was part of the thing that, that created this role for fantasy. Everything now is, hey, he could be used in the Debo role, which has become one of the most overused tropes in all of football and fantasy spaces. So it's just kind of, it's overused, but I think with DJ Moore, that's a thing that really, really could benefit him from a fantasy perspective and just an EPA perspective from a play, like per play basis. So before we get out of here, I wanted to ask you, we've got some burning questions here, but I want to skip over that. And I want to ask you about some season long props, kind of based on your ranking. So first we just talked about DJ Moore. DJ Moore season long over under yardage wise is set at season long receiving prop set at 975.5. Okay. I think that's BetMGM. It's either BetMGM or DraftKings. I pulled that and then pull the source. So 975.5, Dave. Are you going over or under for DJ Moore?
I'm going over. I mean, he's hit that in 5 of the last 7 years. Even the years that he has missed it, he's come up very, very close. I mean, last year was like arguably the worst year we've seen of DJ Moore's career in a completely broken offense, and he still was able to hit 966 yards. So I think that now another major thing, and I know I keep going back to like Ben Johnson, but it is just such a change that nobody in Chicago is used to. Like having good receiving concepts where guys aren't just like running into each other in the middle of the field. You would literally see that last year where like all 3 players would run to the same exact point, and then Caleb Williams would just throw it to this like scrum of 8 players and hope that one of his guys would come down with it. Now there are actually like grown-up pass concepts where guys are running routes that get each other open, and like it's just unbelievable when I'm watching camp. And this is a good defense. Like there are some big playmakers on this defense. Dennis Allen runs a good defense, and it's just so refreshing to see DJ Moore like catching a ball deep downfield in stride with nobody on him. So I think that the 975 is going to be pretty easy for him to clear.
I like that a lot. And then so we move from DJ Moore to DeAndre Swift. 850.5 is the rushing line right now. Are we going over or are we going under?
I think I'll take the under there. I'm expecting a lot of usage as a pass catcher, and I think that's where a lot of his fantasy value is going to come from. But I do think DJ Moore is going to be involved as a running back, and I think Kyle Monangai can take some of the early down work and a lot of the goal line work. So I think whatever the scrimmage yards are set at, if we can get like a 950 or a 1050 scrimmage yards, I might be interested in chasing that. But I think looking at just rushing, that's where I might pause on DeAndre Swift's prop.
Interesting. So he hit 850. He did hit 953, I believe. I'm not looking at it directly. Yeah, he's about 953. So going under there just because he's really inefficient as a rusher, and we think that his rushing prowess will be superseded by him being one of the best pass catching running backs objectively in the NFL. That's not really up for debate. It's just how good can he be as a runner is what his fantasy ceiling will be tied to. He's going to be great as a pass catcher.
Right. Now, we did see a lot of Jamal Williams in that offense, and I don't think we're going to see quite as much Kyle Monangai, but as you can see by my rankings, I have Monangai ahead of Swift. I think that he's already earned that role, or ahead of Roschon Johnson. Yeah. And I think Monangai is somebody who can, rush for 500-600 yards and take a decent amount off of Swift's plate.
That's the one thing that I feel pretty certain about is that, Ryan Poles and this staff are just pretty much ready to move on from the Roschon experiment. That's again, no news is good news, but no news in this case is not good news.
Right.
Moving on. I think I know the answer to this one, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Rome Odunze, 800.5. Are we going over or under?
I'm taking under there. And I think that, if there's an injury to DJ Moore or something like that, it could open up extra opportunities for Rome Odunze, but I'm taking the under there.
Okay. And then Colston Loveland, bet 365, 700.5 is what the line is set at.
Yeah, I'm taking the over. We saw Sam Laporta hit almost 900 yards his rookie season. And I think Colston Loveland, even better receiver.
Yeah, I can't. Now, last but not least, I couldn't find one for Luther Burden. But do you want to throw a prediction out there about what that looks like for Luther Burden in 2025?
If I'm taking the under on Rome Odunze, I'd set Luther Burden's at around 950. I think that's very reasonable, and it wouldn't shock me one bit if he ends up being a 1,000-yard rookie.
Oh, wow. So rather bullish potentially on Luther Burden because of all the things that we've alluded to before with the slot role and that's what Luther Burden's skill set, or for what we've seen from Luther Burden, lends itself to. And then last but not least this time, I mean it, is Caleb Williams, 35.50.5. Are we going over or under?
I might be a sucker for taking this one, but I'm taking the over. 4,000 yards, man. It's got to happen. This team could go 0-17, and if Caleb Williams can throw for 4,001 yards, Bears fans are still going to be happy. They know that. I've heard Poles talk about it. I've heard Ben Johnson talk about it. I've heard Declan Doyle talk about it. Everybody knows the curse of Bears quarterbacks, and I think that they are going to make it a priority this year to try to get Caleb Williams on top of 4,000 yards.
The trouble that I have with people who are out on Caleb Williams is the fact that people act like he was awful last year from a real life perspective and a fantasy perspective. And I think he was about 297 yards away from setting the single season all-time passing mark for the Bears.
Yep.
So this to me is easy smash over. So
he hit that over last year. So yeah. that over-under is implying that he's going to take a step back this year. And I don't see that happening.
Yeah, no, I don't either. Been pretty vocal about what I feel about Caleb and what I think that his ceiling is. And so I think we're going to get closer and closer inching towards that ceiling this year. But that was, to recap, we're going to go Kluge's keys to generational wealth. You can turn this into a season-long parlay if you want. We went over on Caleb Williams passing yards, currently set at 35.50.5 on BetMGM. We went under on Rome Odunze's receiving line at 800.5. We went, there's no official prop available that I could find for Luther Burden, but it's going to be lower than 950.5. So if you're following the Kluge's keys to generational wealth,
take that all line.
You should take the over on that. And then we went over on Colston Loveland, 700.5, and over on DJ Moore, 950.5? Let me see. Let me go back.
Yeah.
950.5 for 975.5 for DJ Moore. We're going over on that. So again, DJ Moore over, Rome Odunze under, Luther Burden over, Colston Loveland over, Caleb Williams over on the passing yardage and receiving yardage props. That's the Kluge's keys to generational wealth.
And if you want to get real cute with it, throw another leg on there for the Bears win total under. I think that one of the reasons that they're going to hit so many overs in the passing game is that they've got a brutal schedule. I talked about it at the top of the show, not only the divisional opponents, but especially late in the year on the road against Philadelphia, on the road against San Francisco. It's a really, really tough schedule for them this year.
Yeah, current line set at 8.5. So I'm afraid that I'll have to go under on that one as well.
It was sitting at 9.5 for a while too. That just started moving over the last couple of weeks. I mean, Bears, you can just bet the Bears win total under every single year, and you will outperform the S&P 500. These meatball Chicago fans just steam that number up every single year. Just keep betting the under.
See, this is why you have realistic fans on to talk about their team, because you get betting nuggets like this where it's like, hey, there's going to be a bunch of people taking the over, steaming that up. Let's take the under here. Before we get out of here, Dave, please tell us where we can find all your work. I'm a huge fan. I can't thank you enough for doing this. I'm really excited to have you on. But tell us where we can find everything that you're doing right now.
Of course, like super simple. Everything's over at Football Guys. I can't even list all the shows that I'm doing. I'm doing like 12 shows a week right now, but wouldn't have it any other way. We're getting close to the season here. So footballguys.com, you can see everything we're working on over there. The one tool that I will plug, we just completely redesigned our Rate My Team feature. So if you just search Rate My Fantasy Football Team, Football Guys, Rate My Team, whatever it is, not only does it give you like an A through F grade on your team, but it'll actually look ahead at bye weeks and then look at players that are on your waiver wire that are going to have bye weeks with good matchups that coincide with that. So, I mean, just a phenomenal feature, completely free. You don't need to pay a penny for it. Highly, highly recommend checking that tool out.
Yeah. And I 1000% as Chef Dor Sanders approved this message because for years, part of my longest running home league, after we finished drafting, everybody imports their teams into Rate My Team and we talk shit to the people with the worst grades immediately after the draft is over with. So it's one of the best features. And if they revamped it and taken it to a whole nother level to help you look out for bye weeks and everything, that's just a cherry on top. So thank you again for doing this, man. I really appreciate it. This has been the in-depth Bears talk that I needed to kind of get a gauge on what's going on in those Hallis halls. So, man, I really appreciate it, man.
Of course. And shoot me a DM in the next couple of weeks if you need any more intel, because like I said, I am looking at some of these as pretty mercurial situations that could be changing a little bit over the next few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And before we get out of here, I'll leave you guys with this. There's ball watchers and there's ball knowers. Assign yourselves accordingly. Until next time.